Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a poster I would like to put up. To me is stunning to realize just the potency of fentanyl and how little it takes to be lethal. And you see this amount compared to a penny. It's just amazing when you start looking at this and realize the cause of death, how little fentanyl is required to cause a death. I think many of us saw earlier Secretary Nielsen in her testimony before the Homeland Security. She made several stunning comments all along the way, but among those were in the first 4 months of the fiscal year, we saw approximately 60,000 migrants each month crossing illegally into our country. Last month alone, more than 76,000, which is a sharp increase. So we're seeing it's not just enormous numbers of people, but we've got to ask the question, who are these people who are coming across the border illegally? And I think it's a fair statement to acknowledge the obvious that none of these can be referred to as law-abiding if they're coming into our country illegally to begin with. And among those, of course, we've dealt with so much of the crime issues, and today the drugs specifically. She mentioned in her testimony that fentanyl smuggling between the ports of entry on the southern border is more than doubled over the last fiscal year. You mentioned a while ago that it's, what, 468% now, Mr. Carroll?
In fentanyl, yes.
Yes, in fentanyl. It's just unbelievable increase. We've all known we've had trouble at the ports of entry, but now obviously between the ports of entry are becoming a serious issue as well. According to federal law enforcement, the threat of illicit fentanyl in the United States is primarily sourced from China and Mexico. I want to follow up a little bit on Mr. Roy's earlier. I am familiar with fentanyl coming from China through the U.S. Postal Service, that type of thing. But walk me through the fentanyl threat that's coming along the southern border. Where's the source of that? Do we know?
Yes, sir, we do, sadly. And it's all originating, or almost all, upper 90%, from China, and it is either coming to China, from China to the U.S., either directly or maybe through a transshipment. But the other predominant way is going into Mexico, and it goes to Mexico either as a finished product or precursor chemicals. There's also, and then in Mexico, they have, the exact number is classified, so I can't give it in this setting, but I'll mention as recently as December of 2018, the Mexican Attorney General's office announced a raid on a fentanyl production lab in Mexico. There are numerous production labs in Mexico that have been disrupted or dismantled by cooperative global law enforcement efforts. And it's coming across, as I said, either the fentanyl, and it's, as you can see from the photograph, it's just so small.
Such a small amount. Well, I want to express gratitude to Hice and the Atlanta, Carolinas, Hice and Okmulgee Drug Task Force in Milledgeville, Georgia, where I'm from. They're doing a great job. It's my understanding that every Mexican cartel has a presence in Georgia. And regardless of how it comes across the southern border, so many of these drugs, they make their way up the various arteries, and so much of it ends up in the Atlanta area and goes however it moves from there. Generally speaking, how do the Mexican drug trafficking organizations operate, Mr. McDaniel? Can you explain that, both on the border and interior?
Yes, sir. They insulate themselves very well to prevent one person, for instance, in the Carolinas, of cooperating and taking down the whole infrastructure. But unfortunately, they send their operatives into the U.S., and if we arrest one, they send a replacement. But they send replacements that are either of familial descent, where they know where their family members are, or if they're going to be trusted. But on the worst part of it is that the operatives that are running the cells in that area, they have family members in Mexico, and they know that they could be losing family members if they don't stay loyal to the cartel.
How would Hice in Houston differ from Hice in Atlanta? I know they've got to work uniquely but separately as well.
We work extremely well together, but yes, sir, you're right. We have a lot more drugs that are being stashed as soon as they cross the U.S. Border Patrol inland checkpoints, and then they're being loaded in mass and going into areas like in your district. And
Thank you. Thank you,
How much
Mr. Chairman.
time has expired, Ms. Spear?